Hello, my name is Will.
And my name is Ellie.
Welcome to Lively Minds, the podcast about mental health challenges that go beyond the ebb and flow of the everyday.
The podcast that looks at how building a better understanding of our mental health can influence how we address it.
Thank you to everybody who has been rating and reviewing our show. We've been receiving some really lovely comments. And this is just a little reminder to say, if you haven't done so already, and if your podcast app allows you to, please do take a moment to rate or review the show, because it really helps.
Yeah.
Today, we are delighted to be joined by author Caro Giles to talk about education and mental health. Caro has worked as a teacher across the education sector. She is winner of the inaugural BBC Countryfile New Writer Award, author of 12 Moons, published by Harper North, and writes a regular monthly column for Psychologies Magazine.
Her latest book, Unschooled, published by Little Toller Books, is a memoir about her life as a single mother who was forced to educate her 4 daughters at home due to our underfunded school system being unable to cater for young people with special educational needs.
In this episode, we are going to discuss how conducive our current school system is for children's positive mental health, the challenges that it can present for children with additional needs, and what needs to change in order for school to become a place that supports everyone's well-being.
Welcome, Caro. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you here. I wondered, just to start with, would you be able to tell us a bit about what your experience was with your daughters and how you ended up in a situation where you were forced to homeschool all 4 of them?
Yeah, it's been a real journey with various children in school and out of school over the years. And currently I now am educating 2 of my 4 daughters at home, although there was a time when I was educating all 4 of them at home. I've been on my own with the kids for about 7 years, and 2 of them have diagnoses of autism. And they're the 2 children who aren't currently attending school. And both of those children disintegrated so terribly within our school system that they could no longer attend. And in the years in between, I've come to understand that there is no real appropriate provision for kids who can't manage in the classroom. So they learn at home with me. Another daughter has been flexi-schooling, which means she spends several days at school and a couple of days at home with me. And another child goes to school full time. So within my little family of 5, there are many different needs that need to be met, and often they have not been able to be met within our schools.
So how well equipped do you think schools are generally to provide the best environment for children's mental well-being?
I think many schools are doing a really good job in understanding that children's mental health needs to be catered for as well as possible in order for children to be able to learn. But I think when children have a particular and complex needs, in my experience, if you have a child who is autistic or managing other elements of neurodivergency, then often the bog standard mainstream school environment is not well equipped to or well enough resourced to be able to support those kids in the classroom.
And what do you think are some of the sort of main barriers, the sort of common barriers that young people, including neurodivergent young people, face within the school environment?
First, I guess I think that our education system is chronically underfunded, and I think our school system has not really moved with the times. So we are still looking at classes of at least 30 children. We're looking at, in fact, over time, the timetable, I think, has become less creative, more crammed full of lots of different things. So for my children, a busy, loud environment is problematic. Lots of different transitions during the day is problematic. Both of the children who I work with at home really like to hyper-focus on an activity and do that for many hours. And produce really beautiful work. And at school, that was not possible for them. But I guess the link to that, the biggest problem has been for my kids, all of my children are girls, and the 2 who broke so horribly within school masked very successfully for many years. And there is still a huge lack of education around the way children are able to present one way at school and another way at home. Yeah. And so my kids looked like they were doing very well, because another thing we have a little bit of an obsession with in our schools is academic achievement. And so because my kids were clever and they were working above the national average, there was little concern about the fact that they were really struggling outside of school, and then it just got harder and harder to get them in. So I guess the main barrier still is a lack of understanding and a lack of education around autistic children's needs, and the way that autism can look. The way that autism is different for every person who is autistic. So I'd say environment has been problematic, but also, just a real lack of understanding. And because I had to become the advocate for my kids because they were not well enough to advocate for themselves, there's also a problem where parents and carers are not listened to and are not treated as the experts of their child. So there's kind of several things that have made my experience very, very difficult and more damaging than it needed to be. So I've given you lots to think about there, but they've been the three kind of things that have made my life very difficult as a parent of neurodivergent kids.
You also, before we came on air, you were talking to us about what you see as the difference between education and school, and that they're not the same thing. Could you just take us through that?
Yeah. So we have a very stereotypical view of what education looks like. We think that education looks like a child who is mixing with lots of peers of a similar age, a child who is sitting still at a table and writing, a child who is reading, a child who is, in a PE class playing football or running or whatever. And for my family, my kids have been told again and again that they are failing because their learning does not look like that. And so for me, school, I write about this a lot more in Unschooled, but for me, school it's seen as the gold standard of learning, certainly in the UK and around the world, really. But for my family, success is just like a very, very different thing. So in my house, we're really careful to talk about achievement and success in a very different way, because my kids haven't hit the milestones in the same way, but they have still, you could argue, actually had to be much more resilient and work much harder to achieve, because they're working within a system that can't hold them safely.
You used to be a teacher yourself and worked in lots of different types of school environments, and I just wondered how these experiences that you've had with your daughters and the education system have changed how you look back on some of your own teaching experiences.
I think I say something in the book about how maybe some of my experiences as a teacher prepared me for what was coming with my own kids, but I guess when I trained as a teacher in like 2005 or something, and I worked in an inner city primary school in London, and I was head of music, or I wasn't head of music, but I was the music teacher, and we did loads of creative stuff and loads of project work, which is what I remembered from my own experience at primary school. And what I really loved most actually about the teaching was not the delivery of the content so much as the pastoral work that I did with the kids. Often these were kids who were refugees, or they were in the care system, or had like really lots and lots of different needs, but the needs that needed to be met were that they needed to be mentally well in order to be able to function in society. And then if they were mentally well and supported and felt held, then they could go on to learn the content that was within the curriculum. And as the curriculum became more and more rigid, and there was less flexibility for me as a teacher to say, oh, that's such a wonderful question you've just asked there. Why don't we let's look up that. Let's look up what Rebecca's just asked me. Let's look into that. Yeah. And would you like to draw a map of that there? And then you can just go off on a tangent, and then everybody goes down little wormholes, and it's all. Yeah. I loved lessons like that, but increasingly I was required to tick boxes and get through a curriculum at such pace, and I found that really disheartening. And I could see that that the kids were losing the light in their eyes a bit as well. Yeah. And so at that point, I went into special education, where there was loads and loads of pastoral support needed. It was a school for children whose main need looked like very, very challenging behaviour, although there were lots of other things going on behind that. These were kids who would be very violent or abscond or whatever. So really it was just a skill, if you can engage any of the kids in an activity and try and find some of the softness inside them, because these kids were really hard. And I loved that job. And actually I had to be so creative in the classroom. And with my own kids whose needs are also varying, I can see that I've brought that into the home, and I've had to completely de-school myself and think about what learning looks like and change my expectations and think about what success is. So it's kind of been a funny kind of circle, I guess, being a teacher in a school and then trying to teach my own kids, and then understanding that they don't want to be taught, they can't be told what to do. They know what they want to do intrinsically, and they just need me to support them to do that. It's been a real journey for me as an educator, and I guess it's made me really think about what we're offering our kids in schools, when I know that there are so many thousands of children who are struggling to thrive in that environment, you know?
I remember when I was a kid, there was a whole hoo-ha about class sizes increasing to 30. Or maybe it was the class sizes were exceeding 30. I can't quite remember the precise details.
And now they're routinely kind of 36 kids in a class now.
And now it's pretty routine. And I think that, plus the rigidity around the curriculum, as you say, and the hyper focus on attainment being the only measure by which your value is judged. And even if you are a young person who actually does quite well in terms of the academic side of things, that's still a huge pressure. It doesn't make the pressure any less, I don't think.
No. There's also a hyperfixation on attendance, and on attendance for 5 days a week. And I get very upset when I hear politicians talking about every day missed at school means that their life chances decrease, you know, in terms of how they'll succeed as adults. And one of my children had no funded education for many years. Another child has had almost 4 years of no funded education, despite me saying this child wants to learn, but she can't learn in the school environment. And actually attending for 5 full days every week is not conducive to success or good mental health for very, very many children. When you think that some of our children start school when they are 4 and are expected to sit still at a table, you know, we're talking about being school ready. That's in the news at the moment. Is your child school ready? Can they sit still?
Are they ready to sit still for 7 hours a day, 5 days in a row?
And why are we wanting a 4-year-old to sit still? I don't know. I don't know why that's a prerequisite of learning, because learning doesn't have to look like sitting still for so many kids. And actually, if my daughter had not been expected to attend school for 5 full days every week, she would have probably lasted a lot longer in school. If they'd said, just come in and just do 3 mornings, or send some, you know, project work home or whatever. If they'd understood that she couldn't manage that. Actually, the school did understand, but local authorities are under a lot of pressure as well, aren't they, to ensure that kids are in school every day. And that's another thing that adds to mental health nightmares for parents like me, is that if your kid's not in school, you're worried you're going to get fined or get a social worker sent round when you're doing your very best. But you also know that having the child in school is detrimental to your child's mental health. So there's so much work to be done really on understanding how we can best support all of our children's mental health within our education system.
So one of the problems that you talked about in your book is that in order for children to receive extra support at school, you first have to sort of prove their need. So one example is forcing them to go into school, just repeatedly traumatising them in order to prove that they can't do it and that it's traumatic. And that just is such an awful thing for the children, but also for you to have to do, just in order for the school to be able to apply for the funding or whatever. And I just wondered if you could talk a bit about that kind of horrible in-between period, and must have had a big impact on your mental health as well.
Yeah, and I think this aspect of children who struggle at school will strike a chord with many parents whose situation isn't as extreme as mine. But lots of kids who often enjoy going into school sometimes find it really, really hard to go to school. And the theme that is running through my book is that we need to be better as a society at listening to children and ensuring that they have a voice. One of the challenges for one of my kids is that she has a diagnosis of elective mutism. So often she has no actual voice, although there are lots of other ways that she communicates. And if you pay attention, you would know what she needed. I think the repeated taking in of a child to school when it's clearly distressing them means that lots of kids who could perhaps have still managed with inside the school system eventually become so broken and damaged by that they're so traumatized they can't go into a school building. That was certainly the experience with my oldest daughter, and I took her into school to demonstrate how distressed she was in the building in order to get the EHCP, which is the paperwork you need to get extra funding. And I've had to sit with the guilt of doing that for a long time, because although I got what she needed, we're still dealing with the fallout from the way she was forced to break in the classroom. I tried again and again to get another daughter into school, because they would say she's fine when she's here, but she wasn't fine at home. No. And it was very hard to get her into school. So again, that was just a case of needing to be heard, and I wasn't heard and my child wasn't necessarily heard. And then my youngest child, who has been flexi schooling, began to demonstrate similar behaviours, began to become quite distressed, stopped being able to sleep as well, was having nightmares, was telling me she didn't want to be at school. There were lots of reasons why school was not working for her at that time. But I took her out of school, and 18 months later she went back into school, and now she really thrives in the school environment. And it was very difficult to not have her in school for that period of time. But had I persisted, I think I would have been where I was with my other two daughters, where she would have crumbled inside school and I never would have got her back in again. Yeah. And the difference was with that youngest child that she really felt that she had a voice, and that was what made the difference. And I think that is what we need to be very careful with, and that is what we need to address when we're looking at children who used to be called school refusers, and now it's called emotionally based school avoidance.
Isn't it, when you say the teacher says, oh, but they're fine in school, that's also back to that masking thing, isn't it? Because it's like, well, no, they weren't fine in school, but the way that was being expressed was like negative symptoms, and it's the positive symptoms, as in like acting out, shouting or whatever, that teacher is used to noticing or having to prioritise attention to, not, oh, hang on a minute, that child's not spoken for a long time. Or
and to be fair to that teacher, she was really excellent and just said it was hard for her to make notes that demonstrated obvious distress at school because my child was masking so successfully. But it is really a problem, in my experience, it has been specific to clever, well-behaved girls who are able to sit and do the work, and girls have historically been, you're more likely to say, oh, just, keep quiet, be good. You're looking for rowdy boys who are kicking off. Things are changing, but still there is a stereotype where you've got like a quiet little girl getting on with her work, and so she's fine. She doesn't need the focus. She doesn't need any attention. She's getting on. And that's been really problematic for my kids, because they just internalised everything and eventually combusted, and everything was much harder to manage.
Hello, it's Will here, just taking a short break to firstly say hello to any new listeners who may have dropped by, and to ask everyone listening right now, if you are enjoying the conversation and haven't done so already, could you do something for us? Could you pause the episode just for a moment and give us a rating or review in your podcast app? I promise we won't go anywhere. Ellie and I do this show in our spare time, so it really means a lot to get the feedback. Done? Brilliant. And also, make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss future episodes, which are released once per month. Okay, now back to the show. And can you also speak a little bit, Caro, to the impact that can have on the mental health of parents and carers?
Well, I guess my situation is very extreme, because I'm the only adult in the house and I have 4 kids, which most people would agree is a lot of kids to have on your own.
I think being an adult and having the only adult in the house and having 4 children sounds quite stressful enough.
Yeah, it's quite hardcore. And what is difficult is that there is no one. You have to be the person doing that every day. And so there are lots of things that are tricky. For me, there wasn't another adult who I could go home and cry to and say, this has been really painful for me, or could you please do the school run, because I can't peel her off me again. So every day it was me. But it also meant that I was always the bad guy as well. It meant I was trying to be the good cop and the bad cop all at once. And so that was exhausting. And I just felt perpetually guilty. I guess there's another impact, which is that if your child is not in school, it's very difficult to work. And So my whole life has been shaped around the fact that I'm a single parent carer with no other support really. So I've been heavily reliant on benefits some of the time. I am someone who really loves to go out and be with people. I'm very extrovert. I'm a very busy person. I haven't been able to go outside the house to work for a long time. The plus side has been that I have hidden in a desk early in the morning in my bedroom and written books and found a way to build a different kind of life for myself. But there is definitely a huge impact upon my mental health in that, because I just feel so isolated, because people assume that if you have children, they will go to school. There's a whole community at school. There's chatting at the school gate. There are teachers who can look out for your kids. There are, lovely opportunities for children within school. Things like, for a long time, I had to still pay for all the food for my kids at lunchtime when my income meant my kids should have had free school meals, but because they couldn't go to school and there was no other support, I was managing that. So then the financial concern feeds into mental health issues as well. So you're just very isolated as a parent whose child can't attend school, and as someone who's told again and again that their child isn't fitting in, and who is not heard or believed because their child behaves differently at school. It's a really challenging and upsetting and relentless kind of life, and you have to work hard to find people who can be in your tribe, who understand what you're going through, because even though there are tens of thousands of children like mine who are unable to attend school, we're very hidden away, and that's not good for people's self-esteem, to be fighting everything on your own all the time. So writing's been my way to connect with other people and kind of share my experience. But I know from all the people who get in touch with me that isolation and being disbelieved are the two things that really impact upon people's mental health, most of all when their child can't manage within the school system.
The word that was coming to my mind was relentless, because it's just like you're just fighting on every angle all day, every day, including and that's just when you're just fighting for your children. That's not even including when you're fighting for yourself. And yeah.
And so, I think as a single parent, you're always fighting for some space for yourself and to find your own identity beyond your parenting and beyond your caring. But when you have children who don't go to school, you lose the part of your identity, which might be going out to work. And you also become everything to your child. So you're the only person who is caring for your child. They're not. Often the mental health needs of the child who is broken within the school system means that they don't trust other adults easily, and they find it hard often to leave the house or be in places where there are lots of people whilst they're recovering from the horrible, burnout that they've experienced as a result of school not being able to meet their needs. So you become everything to everybody except for to yourself, perhaps. So I've had to fight quite hard to cling on to myself. And I think that some people think, how can you do everything that you do on top of caring for 4 children? But really, I've been trying to save myself, or still be able to see myself amongst all of the bureaucracy and the caring and the appointments and the battles with tribunals and things. It's been a bit of a fight for survival in some ways. I don't mean that dramatically, but it's been I'm always trying to hold on to myself beyond all of the caring. Yeah.
Are there any support networks or any ways that parents who homeschool their children can connect and support each other?
Yes, there are. I live quite remotely. When I was home educating the kids a little bit more electively, because it felt easier, although I look back now and realise I was home educating because school was really hard, but I tried to make it feel like it was a lifestyle choice for a couple of years, just to, I would go into Newcastle a lot and be in the museums and be, and that's so lovely. There'd be home ed groups, and I loved all of that. But actually what happened was, after my kids disintegrated inside the classroom, they couldn't tolerate those types of things. And so their need was to be at home, or sometimes, on the beach or something. Nature has been something that's been really helpful for my kids. So there are resources, and definitely actually during the pandemic as well, when everything went online, that was the moment when I started to feel less isolated, because everybody was in the same position as me. I mean, not, in lockdown with 4 kids, but everybody couldn't leave the house. Everybody had to just only manage their own mental health on their own. And so at that point, when everything came online, people started to understand a bit, didn't they, what it meant to have to homeschool their kids and try and work and do everything alongside that. So even though the pandemic was really horrendous in so many ways, it did engender a little more understanding about what it is if you have a child that can't fit into school. And I think lots of things sprung up from that, actually. And definitely I go to an online support group for parent carers whose kids can't manage in school, and they are the women, and it has
They're your tribe.
Women. Yeah, they just really get it. And we all kind of I write about it in the book. We all kind of turn up at the screen looking kind of exhausted and broken, and by the end of it, we've kind of remembered who we are, and we've got fire in our eyes, and we've, you know, we can remember who we are beyond all of the caring, and that's been really valuable.
So one of the quotes from your book, Caro, is, "We need to stop trying to fix the child and fix the system." If funding was no object, what are the key ingredients, do you think, that are needed to create a school environment that genuinely promotes mental well-being as well as learning?
I guess I think that particularly for kids like some of my children, we maybe need to think not just about the school environment, but we need to think about a better relationship between the school and the wider community and the home, so that the school might be part of the education, but also time outside, time at home with family, time in, you know, community hubs or libraries or whatever. I think we need to take a much more holistic view, so that it might be something that that was much more flexible. So it's very hard for parents and carers now, because society works in such a way that people need to work, and often both parents, if there are two parents, are going out to work. If you're a single parent, it's even harder. My children, not all of my children would manage for 5 days. So I think the 5-day model has to go. Yeah. I think we need to think about a much more flexible approach. So children are doing, you know, they're doing a few hours a day somewhere. They might have a day at home. I mean, it would take, you know, some organisation, but it would definitely, we have to listen individually to each child. And that is what is not happening at the moment. We are painting every child with the same brush and making assumptions, and every child is different and every child's needs are different. And if we want to tackle the mental health crisis that is currently kind of sweeping our country, we need to be better at listening to our kids. And in the absence of kids being able to make their own voices heard, we need to be better at listening to the parents as well. So I just think we need to take a much more flexible approach, really, and be mindful that we're still working with a system that was great in Victorian times, but we've moved on a lot further since then. People's needs are different. You know, we can do a lot more learning. We can use technology. And I guess finally, I want to say as well, we need to change what we think success looks like. So success has to stop being passing exams. That has to not be the only thing that makes a child feel they've done well, because too many times my kids and so many other kids have been told that they have failed because they can't sit an exam. You know, I've got a child who often can't speak, who can't go into school, but she is writing a book. She is an expert on Greek mythology. You know, those are wonderful things. You know, she can name all of the birds on the coastline. Like, that's a child who's succeeding. That's a child who is saying, this is what that's not a child who's not thriving. Yeah. She's just not thriving in the way that society says she should be thriving. But ultimately, that means that she feels like she has failed, and she carries that through into the rest of her life with her. And that's what I'm always trying to unravel. Yeah. So if anybody could take anything away from this conversation, I just would like people to listen to the child and listen to the carer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Unschooled by Caro Giles is available to buy now. Thank you for listening. As always, you can find us on social media at Lively Minds Pod.
Make sure you subscribe to Lively Minds wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in again next month for another episode.
Please note that, as always, this show does not constitute medical advice and is not a replacement for seeking professional help. You can find signposting to support on our website, livelymindspod.com.
Take care and bye for now.